Have you ever seen a relationship scandal go viral and wondered, is this really the whole story? What if I told you the truth is far deeper than the screenshots, captions, and rumors you scroll past every day? Today, we're going behind the scenes of a scandal that took social media by storm and uncover the reality everyone missed. Stay with me because what you think you know might just shock you. When we scroll through social media, it's easy to believe that what we see is everything: a picture, a video, a short caption. They all seem to tell the story in one glance. Someone is laughing in a post, sharing a happy moment with their partner, and suddenly the assumption is made their relationship is perfect. Another post shows tension, a cryptic comment, or a public argument, and instantly people decide that something is broken. But the reality is that social media only shows the surface. Behind those filtered smiles and carefully curated captions, there are emotions, struggles, and conversations that nobody else witnesses. We forget that what appears public is often just a fragment of private life, a tiny glimpse into moments that are far more complex than we can imagine. The danger lies in how easily we accept appearances as truth. A viral scandal erupts, and suddenly everyone becomes an expert on someone else's life. People form judgments, take sides, and share opinions as though they were part of the story, but in reality, they are responding to a snapshot. The tension, the misunderstanding, the heartbreak, none of that fits neatly into a post or a thread. Social media is a highlight reel, not a diary of reality. Moments of conflict are magnified, moments of love are scrutinized, and the messy, unpolished parts of life are hidden, leaving the world to create narratives that may have little connection to the truth. The surface is seductive because it's easy to consume. A scandal goes viral and it becomes entertainment. The comments flood in, theories are formed, and the story takes on a life of its own. But the reality, the real conversations that happened, the apologies whispered in private, the tears that no one saw, is often completely different from what the world assumes. Real relationships are built on vulnerability, compromise, and imperfect moments. They cannot be captured in a single post, and they cannot be judged by likes, shares, or retweets. Yet we continue to look, to compare, to assume. We forget that every smile has a story behind it, every argument has a context, and every scandal has layers that social media cannot contain. And while the surface is visible, immediate, and loud, the reality is quiet, complex, and often unseen. Assumptions are one of the quietest yet most destructive forces in our lives, especially when it comes to relationships. We see a moment, a word, or even a single gesture, and our minds immediately create a story. Without knowing the full picture, we fill in the gaps with what seems logical, with what we hope, or with what we fear. It happens constantly, whether it's a misunderstood message, a delayed reply, or an argument that we catch a glimpse of online. We assume the worst or the best, rarely pausing to consider that the truth is far more nuanced. In relationships, assumptions become dangerous because they turn small uncertainties into mountains of doubt. They quietly shape our perception of people, influencing how we respond, how we feel, and how we judge, often without ever confronting the real facts. The problem with assumptions is that they are invisible. They grow silently in our minds, fueled by imagination and sometimes fear, and before we know it, they dictate our reactions. A tiny misunderstanding can escalate into a deep wound simply because one person assumed the intentions of the other. We assume someone is being distant, uncaring, or dishonest, and suddenly we treat them with suspicion or anger, when in reality, the situation might have been completely different. These assumptions are rarely harmless because they affect communication, trust, and emotional intimacy. They create barriers in relationships that were never meant to exist and often prevent people from seeing each other clearly. Social media amplifies this danger even more. In the digital age, we are constantly exposed to snippets of other people's lives, posts, comments, stories, and screenshots that suggest a narrative. We assume we know the truth based on fragments, and before long, entire communities of strangers form judgments about someone's character or relationship. Yet the reality behind those images, behind those moments, is invisible to the world. Assumptions allow us to feel a sense of certainty when there is none, but that certainty is often false. The danger is that these assumptions do not stay confined to thoughts. They spill into words, actions, and decisions that can hurt both ourselves and those around us. The key is to recognize that our minds are constantly creating stories, most of which are incomplete or inaccurate. Pausing to ask questions, seeking clarity, and giving others the benefit of doubt can prevent unnecessary pain. But the moment we let assumptions take control, we risk turning a misunderstanding into a crisis, a small problem into an unspoken resentment. Social media has changed the way we experience relationships. It can make love feel larger than life, but it can also turn ordinary moments into extraordinary pressure. Every post, every story, every like becomes a reflection of how we are performing in someone else's eyes. Couples feel compelled to showcase happiness, milestones, and affection as if love is something that needs constant validation. It's easy to forget that relationships are not competitions, yet the constant exposure to curated lives makes it feel like they are. When one person sees a friend or acquaintance celebrating their relationship online, comparisons creep in, insecurities emerge, and suddenly private love is measured against public displays. Social media creates a lens through which we see not reality, but an idealized version of life that doesn't account for struggles, compromises, or the quiet moments that truly define connection. The pressure isn't only external, it seeps inward. Partners begin to worry about appearances more than authenticity. They question whether their gestures are noticeable enough, whether their love is visible enough, or whether a delayed response to a message will be misinterpreted by an audience of strangers. The fear of judgment can make people act differently, sometimes pretending to be happier, closer, or more in sync than they actually are. Small disagreements or moments of vulnerability may be hidden, not because they aren't real, but because the digital world doesn't leave space for imperfection. Over time, this pressure can distort the relationship itself, replacing natural connection with performance and replacing understanding with anxiety. Then there's the scrutiny from outside eyes. Social media invites commentary from people who are not part of your life, but feel entitled to have opinions about it. Every photo, every caption, every shared memory is dissected, interpreted, and sometimes weaponized. A private disagreement can be misread and amplified into a scandal. Suddenly, partners are not only dealing with their own emotions, but also with the expectations and judgments of an entire virtual audience. The pressure to appear perfect, to explain every move, and to maintain a flawless online image becomes exhausting, leaving little room for genuine communication. In the midst of this digital whirlwind, it's easy to lose sight of why the relationship exists in the first place. Love, trust, and connection are private, delicate, and evolving. They are not meant to be constantly measured, displayed, or validated online. Yet, when social media dictates the rhythm of our emotions, it becomes difficult to separate real intimacy from public performance, leaving both partners caught in a cycle of stress, comparison, and insecurity. Emotional vulnerability is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood aspects of any relationship. It is the part of us that is willing to be seen, truly seen, in our rawest form. To be vulnerable is to show your fears, your insecurities, your hopes, and even your mistakes to someone else, trusting that they will understand rather than judge. But in a world where social media and public perception dominate, vulnerability is often hidden or masked. People fear that opening up will make them appear weak or that their emotions will be used against them, misinterpreted, or shared with the world in ways that amplify pain. This fear creates walls, silent barriers that prevent intimacy from growing and keeps true connection just out of reach. The irony is that the very act that feels most terrifying, sharing your heart, is also the one that allows love to flourish in its purest form. When we allow ourselves to be emotionally vulnerable, we risk discomfort, misunderstanding, and even rejection. But these risks are part of the process of real connection. Without vulnerability, conversations remain superficial, gestures remain performative, and relationships become a series of carefully curated moments rather than genuine interactions. Vulnerability is the space where apologies become meaningful, where empathy grows, and where trust is built layer by layer. It is not a single act, but a continuous choice to be honest with ourselves and with our partners, even when it feels risky. Those quiet moments of admitting a fear, confessing a mistake, or sharing a dream are the threads that weave the fabric of intimacy, creating bonds that are stronger than appearances, rumors, or fleeting happiness. However, vulnerability is also fragile. It requires a safe environment to thrive, partners who listen without judgment, who respond with patience, and who honor the courage it takes to open one's heart. Unfortunately, in relationships under the glare of public scrutiny, emotional vulnerability can be exploited or dismissed, leaving wounds that linger longer than arguments or misunderstandings ever could. The fear of being exposed, of having private feelings become public fodder, can make people retreat, replace honesty with silence, and swap authenticity for pretense. And yet, when vulnerability is nurtured and protected, it becomes the foundation for trust, forgiveness, and lasting love, giving each person the freedom to be fully human, imperfect, and deeply connected. Self reflection is one of the quietest yet most transformative tools in any relationship. It is the act of looking inward, of examining our own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, instead of immediately blaming someone else or seeking validation from the outside world. In moments of conflict or misunderstanding, it's easy to point fingers, to assume the other person is at fault, or to let anger and frustration dictate our responses. But taking the time to pause and reflect allows us to recognize patterns in our own behavior, understand our triggers, and take responsibility for the role we play in the dynamic. Self reflection is not about finding fault with ourselves to feel guilty, but about gaining awareness, learning from our experiences, and making conscious choices that improve not only our relationships, but our own emotional well being. When we engage in self reflection, we start to notice the small but powerful ways in which our perceptions and actions shape the connection we share with others. How often do we respond defensively when we feel hurt? How often do we assume intentions without asking for clarification? How often do we carry past pain into present interactions, letting old wounds dictate our reactions? These are not easy questions to answer, and the process is rarely comfortable, but it is necessary. Relationships are mirrors. They reflect not only the other person, but also ourselves. By looking inward, we can identify areas where we may be projecting our insecurities, misunderstanding signals, or unintentionally creating conflict. Self reflection allows us to approach love with more clarity, patience, and compassion. Social media and public scrutiny can make self reflection even more critical. When opinions, judgments, and viral scandals invade private spaces, it's easy to lose sight of our own values and emotions. We may react to criticism or gossip instead of our own truth, allowing external noise to cloud our judgment. By turning our focus inward, we reclaim ownership of our feelings and choices. We learn to distinguish between what truly matters and what is merely performance for the audience of strangers. Self reflection is the practice of asking, am I acting from love or fear? Am I responding with understanding or resentment? Am I being true to myself or am I reacting to external pressure? These questions do not always have immediate answers, but they guide us toward deeper awareness, emotional maturity, and the ability to navigate relationships with authenticity. Moving forward after a relationship scandal or any emotional upheaval is rarely simple, but it is essential for growth and peace of mind. When trust is shaken, misunderstandings have escalated, or public scrutiny has magnified private pain, the first instinct is often to cling to the hurt or to replay every moment in our minds. Yet true progress begins with the decision to release what we cannot control. The opinions of others, the rumors, and even the mistakes that were made. Moving forward is not about pretending that the pain never existed. It is about acknowledging it, learning from it, and choosing not to let it define the course of our lives or the relationships we hold dear. It is the process of turning a painful experience into a teacher, allowing us to grow stronger, wiser, and more aware of our own needs and boundaries. Healing is a central part of moving forward. Emotional wounds, especially those that are publicly exposed, require patience and self compassion. It is common to feel vulnerable, anxious, or even regretful after a scandal, but these emotions are not weaknesses. They are signals that we need time to process, reflect, and rebuild. Self care becomes more than a luxury, it is a necessity. Whether it is through honest conversations with ourselves, journaling our feelings, or seeking support from trusted friends or mentors, taking deliberate steps to heal allows us to approach the future with clarity instead of carrying the weight of unresolved pain. Moving forward also requires us to examine our own role in the experiences we've had, understanding the lessons hidden within conflict or misunderstandings, and committing to communicate and act differently in the future. Another important aspect of moving forward is restoring trust, not only in others, but also in ourselves. After a scandal or a period of emotional turmoil, doubts and fears can linger, making it difficult to fully open our hearts again. Yet moving forward means allowing ourselves to trust again, to believe in the possibility of connection, love, and respect, while also maintaining healthy boundaries. It is about distinguishing between learning from mistakes and being consumed by them, about choosing growth instead of resentment, and about prioritizing emotional resilience over public validation. By embracing these principles, we gradually reclaim our sense of agency and our capacity to live fully in the present, without being anchored to the shadows of past judgments, mistakes, or misunderstandings. At the end of the day, the truth behind any scandal, misunderstanding, or public judgment is rarely as simple as it appears. What we see on the surface, the comments we read, and the stories we scroll past are only fragments of a much larger, more complex reality. Assumptions, social pressure, and fear of vulnerability can cloud our perception. But the real work, the work that strengthens relationships and heals hearts, happens quietly in moments of self reflection, honesty, and courage. Moving forward means choosing empathy over judgment, understanding over gossip, and growth over resentment. It means giving ourselves and others the grace to be human, imperfect, and deeply emotional, while learning the lessons that each experience offers.